shadow there. So make sure that you put the shadow, you'd want to put the shadow in there, but you're going to keep the shadow real soft, and that keeps it from breaking away. You don't want it to look like they're two separate items. It's all one thing with a shadow on it. Right here, there's a shadow, and you really have to paint satin, you've really got to watch for your shadows. Watch where they are. They're pretty smooth. You get a lot of smooth shading. As far as the way the shadow goes on there is pretty smooth. But then right next to that, you'll have another shadow, and there will be that highlight right in between. And that change from light to dark like that is what makes it look satiny. Okay, I've changed my canvas because I want to show you some other things with regard to burnt umbering and doing the one color underpainting. Again, I've done the shading on his face and put those in there. I didn't want to go over the face again, but I wanted to talk about cotton fabrics. And he's wearing a wrap around his head that is cotton, and then there's some tassels on it. So I wanted to go over that with you. Again, it's very important to do your general shading. Remember that the rule about general shading. Again, I'll try to keep my hand out of the way. And this wraps around his head. This is a shadow from the wrap he's wearing onto the skin. I want you to notice how soft that shadow is at that edge. When you're putting shadows on skin, even if you have a real dark one like this, make sure you keep these edges soft, 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 soft. As you can see, painting cotton is pretty much like anything else. I'm going to go ahead and speed the picture up a little bit, and I want you to watch as we put this wonderful wrap around this boy's head. I want you to notice how everything is broad. The strokes are broad, everything is soft. It's all about the big stuff. And I'm using my nice big brush. Remember we talked about that. You've got to stay with your larger brushes. Stay with your big brush for as long as you can. There's a lot of shadow right in there. This fabric is going to stay nice and soft as long as I stay with a large brush for a while. Now, there are some tassels that hang down here, but we have to first paint beyond the tassels. Remember how we did with lace and with the sheer fabric, you paint beyond it anytime you have something hanging over. Well, this is real dark back in here, so we need to put our dark in there. Otherwise, when we put those tassels on, then how do we get the dark back there? Now, there are some tassels that hang down here, but we have to first paint beyond the tassels. Remember how we did with lace and with the sheer fabric, you paint beyond it anytime you have something hanging over. Well, this is real dark back in here, so we need to put our dark in there. Otherwise, when we put those tassels on, then how do we get the dark back there? If your fabric has a stripe to it or any kind of a pattern, you don't really want to consider that at this point. It's a little soon. What you want to do is look beyond the pattern and find the shadow. On his, just for information for you, on the gesso that I did on this canvas, I added a little bit of color. He's going to be he's going to have a darker skin than my other paintings, so just for the heck of it, I threw a little bit more color in my gesso. You don't have to do that. It's not a prerequisite to doing it. I thought it would be fun to show you, the difference that the two colors will make. So we'll be working with both this darker gesso and a lighter gesso. You can see that whether it's cotton or satin, the point is when you're doing your shading to get the shadows where they belong. There's not that big of a difference between what you do with satin and what you do with cotton, except that on satin the shadows butt right up against the highlights and there's not a whole lot of middle value there. It's either light or it's a shadow. And because you get that quick change in color, it looks shiny. Where with this, that's not going to happen, except that the light is shining on some of these places and creating a real dark shadow. But you get a little softer flow of color. Okay, there are some tassels hanging down here, and the tassels are just kind of a woven. It's kind of like the ends of the cloth that are shredded and then woven. So we want to create kind of that braided look with the little wispy end on it. Sometimes it's not important for you to do the detail on something. For example, on these tassels, the detail is not important. What's important is creating the feeling of the tassel. Sometimes our tendency in painting portraits, when we see our picture, is to clean it up. In other words, for example, a long time ago, I had a student who was doing a painting of her daughter or her granddaughter, and the little girl was sitting down, and of course the dress bunched in the front because, you know, she was sitting. And I think that the real reason that she didn't want to paint the shadows in is she was uncomfortable doing it, felt maybe a little inadequate, and so her idea was to just straighten the dress out. She didn't want it looking all bunched anyway. Well, when you do that, when you take some of the imperfections out of your photograph and you clean it up, what you do is you eliminate some of the life from the picture. And it's real important, I feel, to have that life in there, to see the imperfections, see the places where the hair sticks out a little bit, or where, in this case, where these tassels kind of, and the fray of the fabric kind of works on the photograph to make it interesting. So try to resist the temptation to clean things up in order to make your painting a little simpler. Just take your time and do your painting right. If it's worth doing, it's worth doing right. We've all heard that, and that especially applies to portraits. So that gives you an indication and some idea on how to work with cotton. It's really very basic. It's the same as you do for any other fabric. You're putting in and you're translating your shadows from your original onto your canvas. So you got to run it through your eyes, through that brain, out your hand, and onto the canvas. Whatever you see here, you want to translate it to here. So again, it's just darks and lights. We're going to come back in just a moment, and I'm going to show you how to do the burn umber shading on Levi's, on the denim fabric. Okay, continuing with our burn umber underpainting on fabrics, I want to show you how you underpaint the Levi fabric or denim. There's just one trick to it, and the trick is creating the dimples in the fabric where the seams are. That's a real indicator of the Levi fabric, where the seams will be, there will be little shadows and then little light places. So I'm going to show you how to do that. Again, you start with your general shading. Now I've done one half of this already, and I'm going to work on this side to show you the concept. Take our burnt umber and our large brush, and this side of her outfit is pretty dark. She's got mostly the light hitting over here. So the general shading over on this side is going to be pretty dark. I'm going to add a little bit of oil to my paint to help it to move. Spread it around, and I'm going to do a general shading on this. Oh, that's going on there a little rough. Let me get a little different brush. There we go. Kind of got out into my background, but I'm not too worried about that. Well, I kind of really got out into my background. Okay. General shading, remember that? Remember how we do just an overall color. This side is overall, it's generally darker. So I'm going to scrub my color in here, building in my dark. I'm using a circular motion. It'll help me to get a smoother feel. It'll take just a minute to apply it. Keep working it so it stays smooth, so it gets smooth. I'm not doing any details, I'm just putting a general shading over this. There was an area of highlight hitting over here. I would build that in. I would leave that area a little lighter. It is slightly lighter right in through here, so I'm going to go with a little lighter general shading there. You'll see, it'll all come together. It's a little lighter right here on the collar. I'm going to go ahead and put a shadow there because it's darker than my lightest place on her blouse. She does have a pocket, and right above the pocket there's a shadow. And this makes the pocket look like it pops out.